Takura had dreamed of becoming a sushi chef ever since that fateful day he escaped the tide pool. As a precocious young octopus, he would perch on rocks near the shoreline, watching human chefs at the waterfront restaurant through the windows. He was mesmerized by the graceful dance of knives, fish, and perfectly placed grains of rice. He thought, if I only had 2 hands instead of 8, that would be simple, but life had dealt Takura quite a different set of limbs. Although few had ever heard of an octopus sushi chef, Takura prided himself on his determination. Where human chefs displayed a steady hand for rolling nori, slicing tuna, and presenting intricately arranged nigiri, he had 8 times the reach and, theoretically, 8 times the skill. Yet it came with some serious complications. Whenever he tried to concentrate, at least one tentacle would wander off, slyly flicking fish flakes onto the cutting board or brushing a drop of wasabi off a plate. Customers would gasp, and Takura would have to freeze arm in midair, fish flake perched on a suckered tentacle, hoping no one had noticed. But they always did. He practiced in secret along the ocean floor, rolling seaweed around freshly harvested shellfish. After all, an octopus domain was the sea, yet there wasn't much of a sushi market down in the sand. Jellyfish and fish friends would pop by, curious, but not too keen on devouring raw fish slices. So Takuro scouted the nearest seaside town, a bustling place known for its fresh catch and vibrant culinary scene. If Takuro could find a restaurant there that would hire him, he could prove his worth. After weeks of searching and more rejections than he cared to remember, one chef fainted at the sight of an octopus with a hand-sewn apron, requesting employment, he stumbled upon Shiny Fin Sushi. The small but tidy establishment was owned by Madame Wasabella, a tall woman with a sharp sense of humor. She stood behind the counter when Takura entered, carefully polishing a soy sauce dispenser. Despite her startled expression when she saw an octopus crossing the threshold, she didn't shoo him away. Instead, she raised an eyebrow. "May I help you, sir?" she asked politely, tapping her foot. Takura stammered a little. I'm Takura. I'd like to apply for the open sushi chef position. I hear you're hiring." He unfurled a neatly typed resume from a waterproof pouch slung around his body. Madame Wasabella read it, let out a slow whistle, and eyed him up and down. Not many sushi chefs had marine biology degrees, or 8 arms, for that matter, yet something in her told her to take a chance. She flung open the staff doors and led him to the kitchen, ignoring the 2 servers who stared, wide-eyed, at the unusual candidate. "We'll give it a try," she declared, as though she had settled on a bold new flavor. "We can't say we have a shortage of arms in the kitchen anymore." Standing at the cutting board for the first time, Takura felt the thrill of fulfilling his dream. He sized up a fresh, shiny salmon fillet, sharpened a specially modified fillet knife. Then, with a confident flick, he slid the blade across the fish. The salmon fell into perfect slices. Takura lined them neatly over small mounds of vinegared rice. The staff watched, excited. So far, so good. Then one of his tentacles sprang to life, dangling over the top of the cutting board, losing balance. Suddenly, it plopped onto the clean salmon slices, leaving a slick little imprint of suction cups. Madame Wasabella's eyes widened. "Easy there," she said. Takura gently retrieved the offended slices and slid them into the disposal bin. A pang of guilt coursed through him. He hated wasting food. He needed to master the discipline of controlling all 8 arms at once. So he took a deep breath, gave himself a silent pep talk, and tried again. Slice, 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 perfect each time. Next came the nori roll, which demanded that he place the seaweed, spread the slightly sweet sushi rice, then tuck a crisp piece of cucumber, some fresh crab, and a sprinkling of sesame seeds. It was a multi-step job, but with all his arms, he was a natural. The only problem arrived when the tentacle on the far left decided to sample the crab stick, sneaking a taste when no one seemed to be looking. Takura's cheeks, if octopuses had cheeks, would have blushed a furious red. "I'm sorry," he muttered, pulling the disobedient arm away. "They have a mind of their own sometimes." Madame Wasabella's lips quirked into a half-smile. "As long as it doesn't end up on a customer's plate, I think we can manage." She turned to one of the waitstaff. "Let's see how it goes." Put a rush on that crab roll for table 2. The servers ventured out to the dining area, bearing Takura's first official sushi dish. Everyone braced themselves in the kitchen, waiting to hear shrieks or the sudden crash of plates. Instead, a minute later, the server returned, looking mystified. "They loved it," she announced, making a small flourish with her hand. Said it was fresh, with a unique balance of flavors. Takura's skin brightened with relief. Octopuses often showed their moods through subtle color changes, and he was definitely beaming in that moment. But as dinner service wore on, the fiascos multiplied. Every time Takura felt confident, an inquisitive tentacle would try to stir up mischief. One hand might toss an extra pinch of salt on the sea bream, while another drummed idly on the counter, far too close to the row of decorative teapots. Twice, he knocked an entire tray of pickled ginger to the floor. During the busiest rush of the night, while a line of orders streamed in, he realized 3 of his arms were simultaneously engaged in drastically different tasks. One rolling a spicy tuna roll, one slicing a cucumber garnish, and the last rummaging through the fridge for half an avocado. It was exhilarating and terrifying. Madame Isabella had to remind him repeatedly to slow down and keep the station clean. In a moment of extreme focus, Takura was so preoccupied with chopping scallions that he didn't notice his extra limbs sneaking over to the side until it was too late. He heard a startled yelp from a server. His rogue tentacle was juggling a jar of soy sauce, precariously tipping it over a tray of freshly plated sushi. A stream of salty liquid poured onto the otherwise perfect creations. He hastily slammed the jar upright, but the damage was done. "We need a new tray for table 5, the server sputtered, each word clipped with annoyance. Madame Isabella gave Takura a stern look, though her tone remained calm. "Control, Takura," she said simply. Exhausted and frustrated, Takura retreated at the end of the night to a corner of the kitchen, wrapping all 8 tentacles around himself in a gesture of defeated self-hugging. He was sure he'd be fired, but Madame Isabella approached gently, laid her hand on his scaly mantle, and spoke quietly. "You did well for your first day. The customers love the taste, and your skill is undeniable. We just have to figure out how to let each arm shine when it's supposed to without sabotage." Encouraged, Takura practiced relentlessly. He arrived early every morning to do arm retrol exercises. He'd lay 8 pencils on the countertop and try to pick them up one by one, in alphabetical order of color labels, red, blue, green, etc., without letting any arms cross or interfere. It was maddening, but helped him develop some discipline. Between shifts, he'd watch tutorial videos by famed chefs, pausing to replicate the movements with an actual fish fillet. The addition of bright mittens on a few of his mischievous limbs became an early attempt at keeping track of his troublemakers. In the evenings, he would sit by the open window, letting the ocean breeze flow in while he meditated on how to keep his rebellious arms from dancing everywhere. A few nights later, Madame Isabella decided to host a special event, an under-the-sea sushi extravaganza complete with ocean-themed decor and a full array of specialty rolls. She had gone all out, even placing small coral centerpieces on each table. The restaurant was jam-packed. The sense of excitement was palpable, and Takura felt determined. This was his time to shine, and he resolved to be the best sushi chef any of them had ever seen. He reminded himself to direct each arm with purpose. If one arm was slicing fish, another could be rolling nori, another directed to carefully place garnishes, while the rest remained politely at his sides until called into duty. It was a well-choreographed dance undergoing a real-world test. The orders poured in. Sushi combos maguro, hamachi, unagi, and ebi drove a frenzy of slicing and plating. At one point, a particularly complex roll required shrimp tempura, avocado, cucumber, a drizzle of spicy mayo, and an artistic flourish of thin-sliced lemon for garnish. Takura's arms moved in perfect unison, each playing its role as though they were members of a talented orchestra. It worked. For a while. Ticket after ticket, Takura delivered sushi in record time, and the servers marched out with the trays like victorious soldiers. But as the evening progressed, fatigue set in. The kitchen was hot from all the cooking, and the half-mile line of tickets wouldn't stop. Everyone in the staff felt the strain. Gleaming sweat beads appeared on their foreheads, while Takura's skin color darkened slightly in an octopus version of glistening under the heat. Then came the dreaded moment. As Takura meticulously layered a roll, the shrill beep of the miso soup station's timer startled him. He spun around to check the pot, forgetting that 3 of his tentacles were still engaged with the sushi roll. With a swift yank, he sent a chunk of nearly finished roll flying out of the nori, scattering rice all over the station. A passing server, arms full of tableware, let out a dramatic gasp as a piece of shrimp tempura soared by his ear. In the midst of the chaos, a second tentacle tried to salvage the roll, but knocked over the small dish of sesame seeds instead, sending them raining onto the floor. Time froze in that comedic heartbreak. Rice and sesame seeds formed a mosaic on the tile. Takura's wide eyes revealed a mixture of horror and despair. Madame Wasabella shot him a concerned look but kept her calm. She wiped her brow, then set her jaw. "We can salvage this. Clean up quick. We've got orders to fill." She grabbed a broom and Takura's arms scrambled to sweep the floor and quell the chaos. Later that night, the exhaustion was so thick in the air that no one wanted to speak. The last customer had just left, thoroughly satisfied, but the toll on the chef crew was evident. In rumpled aprons and drooping shoulders, Takura busied himself cleaning his station. He brushed away stray bits of fish and wiped up sticky soy sauce drips, each arm working in tandem. Despite the mishaps, they'd survived a busy night. Maybe he was cut out for this job after all. Too wound up to sleep, Takura headed to the moonlit shoreline after work, letting the gentle ocean waves lap over his tentacles. It was comforting to return to the water, if only for a moment. He remembered the ocean as his original home, but he also felt how this small sushi restaurant was becoming part of him. Could an octopus truly navigate the human world of sushi making? The question weighed on him. Still, Madame Wasabella hadn't fired him, and the customers seemed to appreciate his unique flair. That was enough to fuel him forward. Taking advantage of the next few quiet days, he refined his technique. Whenever the lunch rush slowed, he'd tape a wooden spoon to his most wayward tentacle to keep it out of trouble, or he'd tie a small rag to another to remind it to wipe down surfaces. Soon, each limb had a job. Occasionally, it backfired, like when he forgot which one was the spoon arm and accidentally stirred the wasabi with his bare suction cups, but mostly it provided structure. Madame Wasabella also shared her own tricks of the trade. She taught him to measure the perfect ratio of vinegar to rice, how to properly sharpen his knives, and the subtle practice of layering flavors. "Remember," she would say, "the best sushi is as much about what you don't include as what you do. Restraint and balance are the keys." Takura had to laugh at the irony. Restraint was his biggest hurdle, but the principle applied to all 8 of his limbs, too. Word got around town about Shiny Fin Sushi's brand new octopus chef. At first, it was all rumors. "I heard they replaced the pastry chef with a cephalopod, or some fish monster is cooking raw fish in there," but thanks to Madame Wasabella's no-nonsense approach, harnessing Takuru's charm, the actual story was spun more positively. Flyers announced, "Come meet our new sushi sensation," and soon throngs of curious eaters would poke their heads through the door, hoping to catch a glimpse of the chef with 8 arms, expertly rolling sushi behind the counter. Of course, the comedic mishaps never fully vanished. One afternoon, a toddler sitting at a nearby table was utterly fascinated, pressing her nose against the fish display. Takura gave her a wave with one tentacle, only to realize another of his arms was foisting a chunk of tuna into a roll meant for table 6. He squeaked, "Whoops!" as he nearly placed halibut instead, yet the little one was delighted, giggling, and the mother smiled, snapping a photo. "You've got fans," teased Madame Wasabella, shooing him back on track. But among the kind remarks, a few critics cropped up. Several older, traditional connoisseurs would frown in disapproval, pointing their chopsticks. "An octopus making sushi? Preposterous," one said. "It's unsanitary," another snapped, yet they could never deny the flavor. Once they bit into the meticulously prepared nigiri, they often quieted. Takura's gentle spirit and obvious commitment to cleanliness were evident, despite his arms' disobediences. One busy Friday evening, A famed sushi critic, Kinji Hotaru, strode in unannounced. Known for his scathing reviews of lesser establishments, Kinji arrived with a steely expression that could make a pufferfish deflate. The staff's tension was immediate. Madame Wasabella sidled over to Takara and whispered, "We can't blow this. Keep those arms in line." Takara swallowed hard, feeling a wave of nerves roll through his mantle. Kenji sat at the sushi bar directly in front of Takara, crossing his arms. He watched every flick of the knife, every nimble fold of seaweed, and every pinch of rice with hawk-like intensity. Takura tried to stay calm. He devoted one tentacle to consistently wiping the counter, another to controlling the fish tray, two for rolling, and one more for plating. All the while, he kept a watchful eye on the rebellious arms on the far side, ensuring they didn't dash off to investigate the wasabi tub or investigate the swirling fish in the fridge. Kenji ordered an omakase chef's choice, so the pressure was on to deliver a carefully curated sequence of the finest bites. First came a simple maguro nigiri, ruby red tuna laid carefully over vinegared rice, then hamachi with a hint of yuzu zest. Takura ensured every cut was precise and each garnish delicate. Kenji nodded silently after each piece, scribbling in a small leather notebook. The staff hovered, anxious to see any sign of approval or scorn. Next, Takura prepared one of his signature specialties, the Ocean Garden Roll, which combined shrimp tempura, cucumber, avocado, a sprinkle of microgreens, and a drizzle of lightly sweet sauce. As Kenji lifted the slice to his lips, Takura felt a sudden twitch in the tentacle holding the garnish bottle. Had he placed too much sauce? Was the garnish misaligned? Panic flickered in Takura's eyes. He stuck to the plan, resisting the impulse to tinker further. Kenji took a bite, paused to think, closed his eyes, then nodded again with the ghost of a smile. Madame Wasabella held her breath, hoping for a sign of that elusive marvel, the big thumbs up. By the end, Kenji politely asked for the check, finished his green tea, and departed with polite bows on both sides. Everyone exhaled once he was out the door. The entire staff, especially Takura, felt like deflated balloons. The weight was now all they had. They would find out if they'd soared or sunk when Kenji's column was published in Sunday's paper, and so they waited. Despite the lingering anxiety, business continued. Takura put his heart into every slice and roll, determined that if Kenji's review was scathing, he would still strive to better himself. But Sunday morning arrived, and Madame Wasabella raced to the newsstand before opening. No one could recall seeing the typically poised restaurateur so jumpy. She marched in, newspapers in hand. Staff and a couple of regulars gathered as she flipped through, scanning paragraphs. Her face lit up in awe, her eyes scanning the text. "A hidden gem," she read aloud, "with an unorthodox but extraordinarily talented chef who embodies the art of sushi with every tentacle." The staff erupted in a combination of laughter and cheers. Kenji had, in his own understated style, penned a glowing review praising the freshness, creativity, and the remarkable novelty of having an octopus orchestrate the entire presentation. "It is a spectacle," the review concluded. "Yet beneath the spectacle lies genuine skill and soul, a feat not often achieved in more conventional reproductions of Japanese cuisine." Takura nearly fell off his stool with relief. He gave a big grin, or at least as big as an octopus could muster, and pumped several arms in triumph. Madame Wasabella patted him on the back. "We did it," she said simply. In that moment, Takura felt truly accepted, validated not just by the customers' excited whispers or the staff's encouraging words, but also by one of the most prominent critics in the region. From that day onward, Shiny Fin Sushi became an even more popular destination. Lines snaked out the door with diners from all over, eager to see the multi-armed chef in action. Admittedly, the comedic fiascos didn't vanish entirely. From time to time, a tentacle would fling a bit too much wasabi or knock over a daikon garnish. An unsuspecting server might jump at the feel of a surprise tap on the shoulder, courtesy of a curious suction cup. But the staff knew how to handle it now, and they translated it all into friendly banter with the customers, who found the minor hijinks oddly endearing. Some of Takura's favorite moments came when he had a spare second to chat with delighted kids at the sushi bar. They would giggle as he made two tentacles wave while managing to roll a perfect California roll with the remaining arms. For many of them, it was an unforgettable experience, and the parents thrilled to see their children's excitement, often clicked photos or took short videos, which, rumor had it, started circulating on social media, fueling more local fame. As autumn neared, the restaurant expanded its menu to include seasonal specials, roasted pumpkin tempura rolls, or hearty miso soups featuring root vegetables. On nights when business was slower, Madame Wazabella experimented with new flavor fusions, conferring with Takura in earnest conversation about how best to combine their knowledge. "We want to stand out," she explained. "We want to highlight our differences rather than hide them." Takara nodded, wholeheartedly agreeing. Their final outcome, a signature roll that combined luscious slices of lightly seared fish, a sprinkle of toasted nuts, introduced carefully so no tentacle would fling them accidentally, and a swirl of tangy sauce. Takrit also insisted on a garnish shaped like a miniature octopus carved out of a cucumber piece. The amuse-bouche made for a whimsical treat. With each new creation, Takura honed his craft and deepened the synergy between all 8 arms and the rest of the team. Inevitably, however, there were nights when the stress piled up. The phone ringing non-stop with takeout orders, the fryer spitting oil, and the sushi bar slammed with requests. Takura's limbs sometimes forgot their assigned tasks, leading to comedic collisions. 2 tentacles simultaneously grabbing for the same topping, or one absent-mindedly brushing a lock of Madame Isabella's hair out of her face in a paternal gesture while she was in the middle of plating. Embarrassed, he'd quickly correct himself, only for another arm to knock a spoon off the counter. Yet these moments, while frustrating in real time, added a quirky charm that the loyal clientele grew to appreciate. After months of ups and downs, comedic mishaps, and triumphant successes, it was clear that Takura had found his place at Shiny Fin Sushi. Just as humans sometimes had to adapt to new ideas and techniques, an octopus chef had to adapt to an environment designed for only 2 hands. But he made it work, with creativity, discipline, and, dangerously at times, an overabundance of limbs. Every day reinforced Takura's belief that, even if you're an octopus in a world built for humans, there's always a way to let your passion shine. You just have to be ready to pick yourself up and sweep up occasionally when you accidentally fling fish bits onto the floor. Over time, he learned how to keep each wandering tentacle in check, sometimes with a gentle pat, sometimes with a stern mental scolding, but always with the knowledge that his unique abilities could also be his greatest asset. As the restaurant neared its first holiday season with Takura on staff, Madame Isabella planned a big end-of-year party. Their success had been beyond expectation, and it seemed only right to celebrate. She stood on a small stool to deliver a toast, her voice brimming with pride. She recapped the frantic nights, the comedic near disasters, and the small but significant victories. Then she raised her glass. "To Takura," she said, "the octopus that taught us all that even if you don't perfectly fit the mold, you can serve up something extraordinary and have fun doing it." The whole staff clinked glasses of hot sauce. Takura lifted his own small cup with 2 tentacles, one to keep it steady and one to sip. He felt a swirl of gratitude and relief. The room was filled with laughter and the ever-present aroma of fresh fish and vinegared rice. In that shiny moment, the memory of every spilled soy sauce jar, every frightened server, every sesame seed fiasco melted into warm camaraderie. Because all that really mattered was that they had found a way to work together, harnessing the humor and the daily challenges to create something special. When the festivities wound down and the last employees trickled out the door, the salty evening breeze ruffled the overhead sign. Takura lingered a while, winding his arms into a comfortable knot, gazing at the bright neon fish that gleamed in the dark. He smiled at how far he'd come. An octopus once perched on a tide pool rock, mesmerized by the possibility of becoming the very thing no one believed he could be. Now, he was the sushi chef he'd always wanted to become. And though each day would bring new tentacle troubles, he knew he would greet them with a grin, a sharpened knife, and at least 7 arms, poised and ready for the next grand culinary adventure.